So the thing is, please understand when we get to the end and there's questions, Mrs. B's students that have signed a waiver can ask the questions on camera, but anybody from classes that are joining us here today, I will have your questions routed through either your teacher or I can ask the question for you. So please remember that. With no further ado, Mrs. B.
All right, well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining Mrs. B and Climate Generation for this webcast today. My name is Megan, and I work at Climate Generation, a Will Steger legacy, and we are a nonprofit in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And we educate and empower people to engage in solutions to climate change, and we recognize that educators are critical messengers of climate and energy literacy for hundreds of students each year, just like you guys. And so we are leading a group of 10 educators, Mrs. Bartholomew being one of them, in our Window into Paris program at the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change 21st Conference of the Parties. So that's COP21 in Paris, France this week. So these teachers are engaging in the international climate negotiations as both learners and communicators back to their classrooms and communities. So they represent diverse subject areas, grade levels, and educational settings from around the country. And this year's negotiations have the common goal of achieving a legally binding and universal agreement on climate with the aim of keeping global warming below 2 degrees Celsius. So today we have Shannon Bartholomew with us, who is broadcasting live from Paris. She is a teacher at Saranac High School in New York, and we have her students also on the Hangout today with us. So if you could give a shout out, students. Thanks for joining us. This is great. So Mrs. Bartholomew is just going to share with us what it's like to be part of this event. So I will turn it over to her, and then we'll have time at the end for a little Q&A. So I'm going to mute my microphone. If Bjork, if you'd like to mute your microphone until Mrs. B is done with her presentation, then we can start the Q&A.
So how do we get it over? Oh, okay. Yay! So glad you guys are here. I'm going to try to look at the camera and not down on the corner here all the time. All right, so what I have for you today, I'm going to show you a little bit of what I've been doing here in Paris since I've been here. So bear with me. I'm going to share my screen. You stop. Okay, so, oops, go back. All right, here we are. This is in the conference area. So this is COP21 in Paris, France, 2015. And the gentleman that's with me is another one of the ambassadors that is here in Paris with us. So first of all, I'd really like to say thank you to the Wild Center. If it wasn't for the Wild Center, I wouldn't have known about this program. And, you know, of course, everyone there knows how much Jen does for Saranac Lake High School. I also need to say thank you to Climate Generation for bringing this delegation. It's been awesome, and we've had so many really great opportunities to learn about what's going on in the conference. Also my family and friends who donated lots of money to help get me here, and also Saranac Lake High School for making my trip possible. So I'm really grateful to everybody for all that they've done to help me. So this is the group that I'm here with. Up in the corner you can see we're at our hostel. And we've got 6 teachers here from Minnesota, 1 from Colorado, 1 from North Carolina, 1 from Georgia, and 1 me. Yay! So I traveled about 3,500 miles to get here to witness some really important history. Why is it so historic? Well, because countries came here for the first time with commitments that they had already made, and these are called indices. And so they came here already saying what they were willing or able to do to help mitigate the climate crisis. So this was the first time that the United Nations had really asked countries to come forward. Instead of telling the countries what they had to do, they were asking the countries, what can you do? And now what they're really working on is negotiating how to hold the parties accountable for the actions that they have said that they could do. So the first day that I was here, we went to UNESCO, which is the United Nations Education, Science, and Culture organization. And we got to hear from 3 different indigenous peoples share their story about climate change as they see it in their communities, and the importance for the Conference of Parties to come up with a really strong binding agreement. And I was told that my video is not going to play very well, so I guess I'm going to skip it. We'll watch it when I get back. But her name is Kathy Jetnell-Kijner, and she's an amazing spoken word poet. And she gave a very powerful presentation. I really want you all to see it. So if you look up this YouTube video on the Climate Generation channel, you'll be amazed. And if you don't watch it, you watch it when I get back, because it's very, very powerful. Down here in the corner, this is the first day that we went to the actual conference area, and these 2 gentlemen right here were just walking through the pillars that you enter through when you get to the COP. And he was the president of Mozambique. So it's just the amazing encounters that you have here at the COP can't be beat. And so he was just a very happy and joyful man that we happened to stop and talk with, and he took a picture with us. And even on our way to COP, you can see evidence of COP all over Paris. This is a picture of a giant billboard that is in the subway stations showing the panda and the woman, fighting for climate. And here's another big giant subway sign saying that we have to protect the world for our children. And these trees over here are at the conference site as well. And the leaves, quote unquote leaves, on the trees are actually wind turbines that are generating the electricity required for the climate generation areas at COP. So they were very cool. So what have I seen since I've been here? Well, I've seen lots of different types of demonstrations. Some of them are a little kookier than others. You can see the guys dressed up as penguins. And then some were a lot more serious. So looking for zero waste, no incineration or no burning of garbage. And then, of course, there was a demonstration about what are we going to do about the United States. I know that you have probably heard on the news all of the action that's been happening in Congress and the Green Act, and how they're posturing and saying that nothing is going to come good out of this conference. But trust me when I say that that's not true. I've also attended quite a few conferences, and yes, that is Al Gore. I didn't actually get to see him again, but he was in a different area of the building. So this is a picture that someone took for me that was listening to Al Gore give his climate reality presentation again, and it was broadcast all over the green zone. So I didn't get to see him in person again, but I did get to hear him and see him in the green zone. And this other conference here, this was talking about women and gender equality and how climate change is impacting that. This, the other slide here that, oops, where do we go? The other slide, this is H.E. Ronald Jumeau. He's the ambassador for climate change in small island developing states issues from the Seychelles, and they brokered a really cool agreement with it's called the Paris Club. So some rich countries have given them debt relief for protecting all of their their oceans that surround their lands. And I think the really cool part about his title is that the HE stands for His Excellency. So I just thought that that was really neat. So this morning, just a few minutes ago, I just actually got back. My students in my living environment class submitted position statements to Climate Generation before I left. And we, the Climate Generation people that I'm here with, they printed out all of your statements and your concerns, and they put them in this really beautifully bound book. And today we traveled to the Embassy of the United States, and we got to meet with Dr. John Holdren there. And he received all of those statements, and he listened to us tell him about why you're so concerned, and what are some things that you're really worried about, and how important is COP to you guys there in Saranac Lake. And he received the message so beautifully, and just really was very kind to just pay attention to what we as educators are telling him about what you as students and the young people that are going to shoulder a lot of the responsibility as you grow into adulthood of all of this climate change that is happening. And if you don't know who Dr. John Holdren is, he's the science advisor to the president. And he said, in more or less words, that he was going to make sure that President Obama saw all of your position statements too. So that's just amazing that he was willing to meet with us and then also say that he was going to deliver our message to the President of the United States. Thanks, Obama. Okay, so I'm going to go back. I don't want to stop sharing it. Okay. Yay! All right, so before I left, some of you submitted some questions to me that you wanted me to find out about or to answer. And so I'm going to take a few minutes just to answer some of the questions that you've already submitted to me. And thanks so much for giving me a mission while I was here. A couple of you asked about island nations and whether or not they've had to move to another location because of the sea level rise. And really, as of now, no one has actually physically had to move, but they have made plans to move. So flooding is occurring at high tides in the Marshall Islands. So they've already been displaced once, and now they're looking for another place to go to. The Inupiaq natives in Alaska, we've talked about them also. They're facing relocation in the next 5 years. And they estimate that it's going to cost about $250 million to move the Inupiaqs from the islands that they live on. And the Army Corps of Engineers made that estimation for them, and they realized that it's not cheap and it's not something that would be easy. So they're really struggling with how they're going to make that all work out. Next question was from Danielle. She asked, why can't we just come up with our own agreements? Why do we have to have this conference where everybody agrees on something? And like I said before, this is one of the reasons why this is most historic talk, was because people came to, or countries came to this with what they thought they could do. And so this framework is what they're trying to agree on and how to hold people accountable. Okay, so more, let's see. So Bruno asked, how far would global sea levels rise if all the water in the polar ice caps melted? And that would be approximately 216 feet. 216 feet if everything melted all at once. And is this realistic in our lifetimes? Probably not. But if we continue on our current path, levels could rise 6 feet, displacing many on our own East Coast. And if we want to really think about worst case scenarios, if the entire we would be facing a 23-foot rise, which would put London underwater. So So Savannah asked about animal species, and currently about a quarter of the Earth species are threatened due to climate change because of the domino effect, right? So if food chains are impacted, we've seen how that can impact those that are higher up on the food chain. So many of the food chains in the oceans are in really dire straits due to chloral bleaching, and this is one of the most biodiverse places on Earth. So if we lose the biodiversity there, we could be in really big trouble, because a lot of people on our planet depend on the ocean for their protein. Let's see. Oh, is climate change to blame for the weather that we've been having lately? Well, the weather is a changing thing, and it varies from day to day. So if we're talking about climate, we're looking at changes in the long term. So a single phenomena, blame on climate change, no, but this general trend of warming, we see more and more every year. So the reason why we don't have snow yet, probably you could associate with that. I heard it's like 50 degrees there. Is this true? Yeah, you wearing shorts at school? Okay. Abby wanted to know if climate change is unavoidable, can't we just adapt to it? Well, unfortunately, this is something that we have to deal with. I mean, we are going to have adaptations. It's just going to, the question is really how much are we going to have to adapt, and how much is it going to cost? So warmer climates are going to have more drastic consequences. So then we will, there in the Adirondacks, obviously. Grant asked if we burned all the fossil fuels or stopped burning the fossil fuels. It would take about 40 years for the climate to stabilize again, because carbon dioxide stays in the atmosphere for a really long time. So even if we stopped burning our fossil fuels right now, we would probably still see a little bit of warming before it stabilized again. And let's see. Maggie had a couple of really great questions. And she asked about tipping points in the climate. And so there's lots of different tipping points that you could look at as an indicator of what's going on in the planet. So if we look at the Arctic summer sea ice, if the planet reaches 1.5 degrees warming, we could see the tipping point of that important indicator. So it would be past a point of no return. So while there's decreasing levels of stability in some regions of our planet, there could be others that would not be affected until it gets much warmer. But most agree that 1.5 degrees Celsius is probably the safest to avoid many of the really horrible tipping points. And I know that in the news they talk about the 2 degrees Celsius, but recently here at the climate talks they've been putting out the 1.5 degrees Celsius, because 2 degrees was something that governments, not scientists, proposed. So 2 degrees has all of a sudden become not the safe number, and they're really looking at trying to put targets back at 1.5 degrees Celsius. So there's some controversy there about it, but a lot of the major countries are agreeing that 1.5 is probably going to be better to deal with. So what are countries doing to increase their use of renewable energies? Many countries have been pursuing renewables at a much faster rate than the United States. Here in Paris, the diesel cars, like the taxi cabs, they turn off when they idle, and then they start back up again when you step on the gas pedal, which reduces emissions a lot. Denmark produces 140% of their energy from renewables, and there's many NGOs here that are assisting developing countries to obtain affordable solar. So like we've talked about before when I gave you the climate reality presentation, there's a lot of really good work going on. How many trees would have to be planted for it to cancel out the amount of carbon that's already been produced? Well, all right, so one tree absorbs about 48 pounds of carbon dioxide per year, and currently we are emitting about 36 gigatons annually. So if we want to do the math, which I didn't do it for you, but if you want to do it, there's 2.2 times 10 to the 12th pounds in a gigaton. So a lot of trees. So we need to have something. If we were going to go for that type of mitigation, we would have to find some sort of technology to suck the carbon out of the air. And let's see, I've got several other questions here to talk about. What is the agreement? What exactly is the COP trying to agree on? And the ultimate goal is to reach a legally binding agreement that holds parties to the declared indices or the declared commitments that they came to COP with. Will it be called a treaty? Probably not. Will it be called a protocol? I'm not sure. I'm not really sure what they're going to call it exactly. They need to be conscientious of the fact that some governments, like the U.S., might have stumbling blocks to overcome in order to get the government to agree to it, like the House of Representatives to agree to it. Silas wanted to know when the pro-snow was being delivered. The pro-snow letter was being delivered, and I'm really sorry. I talked to the climate reality people, and I forgot to ask them. I know that Al Gore was in the Blue Zone today giving his presentation, or sorry, that was yesterday giving his presentation. So maybe he delivered it, but I'm sorry I didn't find that out. When I go back to the conference area, I will ask and find out for sure. What's the U.S. going to do now that the Clean Power Plan and environmental protection bills were voted down? And so, interestingly enough, most of the commitments that the U.S. brought to the COP are targets that are already being implemented here in the U.S. In the states, or else they're ones that Obama will likely implement by executive order to kind of bypass Congress. So he's looking for ways that the commitments that he went to the COP with, he's really looking for ways that he can kind of do a workaround the House, because they are not being very helpful in all of this. And so what have they accomplished so far? Well, they had a draft agreement on the table. So the overall framework is already agreed upon. Now it's just the parts in brackets. So small pieces that everybody has to agree upon, or that are still in brackets, are going to, they're being negotiated still. And also, am I eating any good French fruit? I mean, not as much as I would like, because I'm too busy running around from place to place trying to see everything that I can. So, but it is delicious, and I'm having a great time as well. So I guess that's all I really had to share with you. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Great, yeah, we will take some questions from New York now. If you guys want to come up to the camera or just raise your hand.
We have our social studies teacher, Mr. Thill, coming up here.
Where do we go?
Ah.
Hi. Hi, Miss B. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. How you doing?
This is from my OAS class. I have some questions from them. They wanted to know, what are they saying at COP21 about helping underdeveloped nations to not only develop renewable energy, but deal with climate-caused disasters?
That's a great question. There's a part of the COP that deals directly with finance. So there's this giant $200 billion or $100 billion that they're trying to agree upon, so that there is money to help with developing countries, and also to to mitigate the effects of the giant storms. So that and it's one of the most contested negotiating points right now, simply because the United States and the other large and rich and developed countries, they want to move some of the responsibility to the less developed countries in an equitable manner, I guess you want to say, but they're trying to figure out how they can make the plan to move some of the responsibility to contributing to this fund to other countries besides just the really rich.
Okay, I have one more question. Is there any technology being developed to help remove carbon from the air that could speed up the reversal of the carbon emissions process?
I'm not going to say that I haven't run into it yet, but that is certainly something that is on the table. Because, like I said, trees, they do a great job, but they're not able to really compensate for the gigatons of carbon that we are releasing into the atmosphere. So as of right now, I don't think that they have anything that is really comparable, hey Jenna, comparable to figuring out what they're going to be able to do with that.
Hi.
Hey.
So, like, at the meetings so far, what have been, like, the hardest things to agree upon with transitioning to the carbon economy, like the low carbon economy?
Well, there's, like I said, because they came with their own commitments, it's now just the tweaking of the wording to make sure that everything is said in the correct way, and then whether they can agree on whether it's a 1.5 degree Celsius that they want to try to keep under, or if it's a 2 degrees Celsius. So there's, you know, I mean, we talked about countries like Saudi Arabia, right? The oil-producing countries.
Yeah.
And when you say to them, keep it in the ground, they're kind of like, well, wait a second, that's my livelihood. So there's some of those things. And then, like I said, another really big point of contention is the financial part. And then also, how do we equitably treat those indigenous people that are really at the most risk, right? So like the Marshall Islands and the Seychelles and the Papua New Guinea and stuff like that.
Okay.
So how do we equitably treat them, and can we keep them in the language of the whole COP?
That makes sense. Okay, have fun in Paris.
I have a question from student Mrs. Brusso's class. He's very interested in ice ages and the past ice ages and so on. I'm curious about what's going on today. Could that possibly bring about another ice age?
Well, we've actually averted an ice age, right? We should be in the midst of going into an ice age because of these 6,000-year cycles. So we've actually bypassed an ice age, and we're on our way to keep on warming. So no ice ages in the near future.
Other questions from people from other classes here? We're going to let Mr. Thill round things out with questions from his class.
It's me again. Everybody's being shy. Miss B? I think we're losing you, Miss B. Can you hear us? Say something. Blink once.
Can you hear us?
Hey, I think we lost her.
Yeah, let me check into that.
Okay.
I'm going to text them.
Does anybody else have questions? Yeah, come on down. Oh, come on. Macy, come on. Here, get in the house. She didn't sign the waiver. Oh, you didn't sign the waiver? Yes. What's your question? I'll ask you. Of the conference. Okay. Caitlin, what's your question? One what? One person?
I was just communicating with them. We're going to have them join in again, exit out and join in and see if that works.
I'm back. Sorry about that.
Can you hear us?
Yes, sorry about that.
No problem. All right, I have another question for you.
Okay.
2 parts. One, how much carbon does your average human, I guess in the United States, emit? And 2, how much carbon is the COP21 conference emitting?
Oh, all right. Wow, great question. And the average U.S. citizen, geez, Joe, thanks. I don't know. Yeah, I can't. I'm sorry. I don't know the average amount that a human per year. I don't know that off the top of my head, and I probably should, but I don't. But I know that the COP conference itself is doing as much as it can to be carbon neutral. Now, that doesn't take into account all the people traveling by airplane to get there, but all of the services that are being offered and all of the structures that were built are all with renewable resources, and we've been powered by wind power and such. So the COP itself, the meeting itself, is trying to be as carbon neutral as it possibly can, but getting there is another issue.
Okay, thank you. Any other?
Great. I think we're good for questions unless somebody has a pressing one, but I think we can call it a morning.
One last one.
Can you turn the camera around so I can see everybody?
Yeah.
I want to see everybody.
Hi, Mrs. B.
Hey! Yay! I miss you guys. I hope you're having fun.
I know. I'm too
You
short.
guys are great. Thank you.
Well, thanks everybody in Saranac Lake for joining us, and thanks Mrs. B for your awesome thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.